Come in, and welcome. As you may or may not be aware, you've just entered a three-dimensional nightmare from which you may never awaken. Tonight, we'll discuss a fascinating astronomical event, or more precisely, the horror that accompanies it. Our story is called Blood Moon Terror, and when you hear it, you'll pray for sunrise, which never really happens on the Nightfall radio show. Have you ever heard the term blood moon? Yeah, it sounds like a term that Rod Serling or Alfred Hitchcock made up, but it's really just a kind of non-scientific term for the moon's rusty colored hue when there's a total lunar eclipse. But for me, it will always be connected to the most terrifying experience of my life. I decided to get some decent pictures and went to a scheduled spot just outside of town. And pulling into the area, I noticed a young tree had fallen by a nearby creek, right by where you could park your car near the bank to fish in the creek. I started setting up the scope and the camera, and I started to hear a lot of rustling in the brush. And since coyotes are common enough, I had my handgun on my hip, so I didn't pay it much mind. The rustling soon became more akin to something violently crashing through the woods. At this point, I stopped what I was doing and shined my flashlight around to try to see what it was. I figured maybe a cow or something from one of the nearby farms had gotten loose, but I couldn't see anything. Now, I was off-put by the sound, so I started to pack my stuff to leave, when I heard some splashing, followed by the sound of a very large crack. I turned and drew my gun while pointing my light at the fallen tree, and there it stood. Suddenly everything kind of went into slow motion. This 7-foot-tall thing with what seemed to me at the time was the face of a wolf, but much too large to be a wolf or coyote. I'm a bit over 6 feet tall, and this thing was easily a head taller than me. As the light hit it, it paused, looked at me, growled, and then charged at me. I got off some shots in quick succession before it barreled into me, throwing me back and knocking me flat on my ass. Rather than follow through on with the attack, it kept running and disappeared into a cornfield. I got up and left the rest of my stuff and came back the next day to find a farmer, a couple of sheriffs, and a game warden. The farmer had sheep and a couple had been killed the night before. So he'd been driving around setting up trail cams and stumbled upon my stuff. The weird trail of smashed corn as well as some strange prints in the mud, and he called the game warden. I told them about what I saw and what happened to me, and they said it was probably a bear. Now, of course, I knew that was bullshit, but decided that it would probably be better not to make a big fuss about it. I looked online and read that people call this creature dogman. Also, based on what I read, I was very lucky to get out of that situation alive. People need to understand these things are real, and they're out there. It's not a joke. It's not a game. Anytime you have an encounter with this creature, it's a matter of life and death.